Hello, everyone. We are rolling for another episode of the JJF1 podcast, where Jonah and Jordan talk about all things related to F1. Today, we have a double header that we're going to talk about. First, we're going to talk about the Qatar Grand Prix, the inaugural Qatar Grand Prix, where Lewis Hamilton won from Max Verstappen in second and Fernando Alonso in third. And then we are recording immediately after. The podium ended 10 minutes ago, the inaugural Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, where Lewis Hamilton won from Max Verstappen and Valtteri Bottas getting Esteban Ocon on the line. So, Jordan, I mean, the emotions are still running high after Saudi Arabia. I mean, run us through the last 2-3 weeks. It's been crazy.
Yeah, it's been really crazy. And it's crazy to think that right now, because Lewis Hamilton got the fastest lap and won the past two races, he is now neck and neck with Max Verstappen. They're going into Abu Dhabi with the same amount of points. And I was actually just reading this while we were right after the podium ceremony on Instagram. I saw ESPN F1 posted that if they both DNF next week, Max Verstappen wins based off of wins alone. So I hope Red Bull's not listening. I hope they're not getting any ideas, but it just goes to show you how tight this is.
Oh my God.
What's running through your head, Jonah? What's going on?
You know what's running through my head? I mean, we watched the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix literally 10 minutes ago. And I think we have seen that Max Verstappen has kept it calm and collective until there are actual consequences on his driving legacy. We've seen, I mean, we knew in the beginning when he started off in his early years at Red Bull, like 2016, 2017, that he was always really aggressive. I mean, especially when he was dealing with Daniel Ricciardo. And it was just, it really showed that he had some work to do to make sure that he could fix his aggressiveness and make sure that he times everything well. And over the last few races, actually, we've seen that I feel like that's come back. It never really disappeared. It kind of just came back. So I don't know how I feel about this championship. I was terrified going into this race. I think that my being terrified was very justified. But we are going to have an absolutely crazy race in 7 days' time. I'm going to be writing a final exam during half of the race, and I am going to be extremely disappointed. But yeah, let's talk about Qatar first before we dive into Saudi Arabia.
Yes.
So first, Jordan, what do you think about the circuit? Because it immediately it looked like a W, or was it a W? It might have been a W.
It was, to me, it kind of looks like a flower where there was like some 3 petals coming.
Yeah.
Coming.
So what do you think of the circuit?
So my initial thoughts were everyone's initial thoughts. It's going to be very hard to overtake, not going to, be conducive to wheel-to-wheel racing. But we ended up being treated to some really good racing. I would have liked to see Pierre Gasly in the AlphaTauri take more advantage of his front row start as opposed to really losing out.
Yeah.
I think that he could have, really mixed it up a bit in terms of the championship fight. If he really kept his place, he could have really done some damage control for Mercedes and the constructors. And put some pressure on Lewis Hamilton as well with Max Verstappen. We know that Checo wasn't really, I think he got out in Q2 in Qatar, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So we knew that Checo was really out of the picture. So we could have seen maybe Pierre Gasly kind of step into a bigger role we know that AlphaTauri is not the same team as Red Bull, but we know that they're under the same umbrella. Even before the race, we saw Helmut Marko say a couple of words to Pierre Gasly, and that doesn't happen if there's nothing on the line.
I'm pretty sure the last time Helmut Marko said something to Pierre Gasly, it was, "You're no longer driving for Red Bull. We've replaced you with Alex Albon."
So I think that I would like to see Pierre Gasly do a lot more with what he was given, and unfortunately he really spoiled that. I think he fell even out of the points. I don't remember exactly, but yeah, it was kind of disappointing. Alonso was really great to see, and yeah, it was conducive to wheel to wheel racing, but in the back pack of the grid, not where Hamilton was. He was far leaps and bounds ahead of everybody else.
It wasn't even close. One thing that I could say is, I'm glad you talked about Pierre Gasly, because I had that in my notes of things that we should talk about. I mean, he started P2, and where did he end up?
I think he was outside the points.
Yeah, it was a really weird move from Pierre Gasly. I mean, I figured that his AlphaTauri didn't have that much race pace, but I figured that it would have some race pace, enough to maybe salvage, I don't know, 6th, 5th.
That's where he normally is, and I wouldn't have been surprised if he ended up there, but it's just disappointing that when they're in a really tight fight with Alpine, and who is in back of them is Alpine, it's disappointing that he couldn't have taken more advantage of the situation. And as a result, Alpine is way ahead in the Constructors' Championship just because of that race alone. Yuki Tsunoda was in the points, Gasly was in the points, and Ocon and Alonso both reached the points, including Alonso's podium.
Yeah, I mean, we could also talk about, we could talk about Alonso all that we want. I mean, I think we both have been really proven wrong about our thoughts about Fernando Alonso coming back into Formula One. I don't know I remember you weren't a huge fan of it. I really wasn't a huge fan of it. And I think that this race showed that Fernando Alonso really does belong back in F1. And he has never felt more at home than at Team Enstone, where he won his 2 championships. And then now he's back and managed to put a podium in Qatar on sheer merit.
Yeah, and it was a great track to see too, because I love when we go to new circuits. I love races that it's the first time at a new circuit. It's my favorite sort of races. And it really shows you, like, at least for me, what it shows me is that which drivers are able to adapt the most to unprecedented conditions. We know that Lewis Hamilton has this amazing track record of winning almost every time he goes to a new circuit, and that just shows that Lewis can adapt his racing, his racecraft for any sort of circuit, which really speaks to what a true amazing racer he is. And I think that we could say that a bit for Alonso, because they have, just like today in Saudi Arabia, they had no data in Qatar, and he was still able to pull off something pretty good, pretty special.
I think that it also shows that, I don't know what happened between Hungary and now, but Alpine has really kicked it up. I mean, we could talk about Alpine as well when we move into Saudi Arabia, and how Ocon basically was P3 but wasn't. But I mean, I have a few more points that I want to talk about in Saudi Arabia. First, we need to talk about our boy, Lance Stroll, who had his best result of the season being in P6. Okay?
In Qatar.
I think it shows that Lance really has talent, and that in a situation where he could really take advantage, he ended up taking advantage. So if you want to give me some quick thoughts about how Lance did, I mean, I think that it was really well driven by him, and the amount of overtakes that he managed to do in that car were impressive.
So it's funny you say that because I actually didn't take that away at all. For me, this season has been very inconsistent for Lance and Aston Martin. And it's not like Alpine where they can go. They had a stretch after Hungary where they've been destroying it in the Drivers' Championships. Crazy lead on AlphaTauri. They cemented their spot above AlphaTauri, and that's what their goal was. To me, Aston Martin has been way too inconsistent for me to have a definitive conclusion on their performance. And on Lance Stroll's performance this year, yeah, he was in P6 in Qatar, but Vettel and Lance Stroll were not in Q2 in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, that was bad.
And Lance Stroll is also, I think, 3 or 4 times failed to get out of Q3 as well. So for me, that performance just gives me more question marks as to what's causing the one-off really good performance versus what's causing the more consistent poor performances and the more inconsistent mediocre performances.
You know what I think this could be for Aston Martin? I think this could be like the tanking for Shane Wright in hockey, where, okay, you need one really bad year so that eventually you could pick it up and end up winning races and winning championships again. I mean, let's not forget, last year, Racing Point had the third best car and won a race, number one. And then after that, Lance was on the podium twice, and Checo was on the podium, what was it, 3-4 times, including the win. So yeah, it's I think Aston Martin needs that kind of season to kind of put themselves into perspective, to really humble themselves, and hopefully it means that they get to pick it up next year.
Well, I really hope that Lawrence Stroll is investing a lot into the 2022 regulations. I really hope that we don't know anything, and he's keeping the public so out of the loop about their plans for 2022 that they've invested so much money into it that they come out with stellar performance. That's what I really hope is going on.
I hope you're right. I hope
I hope they have a secret facility somewhere. They just broke ground. I hope they have a secret facility somewhere else that they've been developing this car.
Yeah.
It's going to be a crazy car, maybe beat Mercedes. That's what I'm hoping.
Do you have anything else to add on Qatar before we head over to the next race?
There is one thing that I want to talk about, but it's not just about Qatar. It's more about a general performance of one team, and that's McLaren.
What happened?
Lando Norris has been in P10, P9, P10, P9, give or take, almost every single race. And Ricardo, he had I mean, I don't want to sound like he didn't deserve it, but he was very lucky because of the red flag and the yellow flags today, and managed to squeeze his way into P5, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So, but he has been outside the points, very like 9th, 10th, 7th, 8th for the past couple of races too. So what do you think has been going on with McLaren?
I have no idea. I feel like it's less so McLaren doing badly than it is Ferrari doing really well. I mean, I think it shows. I don't know. I think my opinion has changed a little bit on Lando Norris, because Lando Norris has been really childish recently in interviews and just in his general reaction during races, after the races, in preparation. I really have gotten a weird vibe from Lando Norris over the last few races. And McLaren in general, I don't know what's happening to them. They've been really slowing down, and Ferrari's been really picking up the pace. I mean, I think that overall, if you're talking about consistently, Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz are more consistent, rather consistently good or consistently mediocre in the history of their careers than Lando Norris and Daniel Ricciardo. So that is what I have to say on that. I mean, I don't know. I've been getting a really weird vibe off Lando Norris recently. Uh, I'm just feeling it. It's like he'll like get mad at his race instructors and like scream at them on radio, and it just in interviews it feels like he's entitled to something, but he's not. You know what I'm talking about? That I'm getting a weird vibe from Lando.
And maybe it's because he moved to Monaco a bit prematurely.
He moved to Monaco.
I'm just joking. All jokes aside, since Russia, they've fallen off a cliff. There's no way around it. They've fallen off a cliff. He was gonna win the race in Russia. They'd won the race before that in Italy.
I mean,
And
think
they
of what
been
happened in Russia
above
though.
P5 since.
Yeah. But think about what happened in Russia. I mean, as soon as Lando Norris had the slightest bit of adversity from his team, he basically said, no, like shut up. He literally said shut up to his race engineer on radio and said, listen, I can handle this myself. And then 2 turns later, he ends up spinning out. So
yeah, it's a very interesting situation. But you know what is an even more interesting situation? The 2021 Saudi Arabian Grand Prix in Jeddah.
Before you talk about Saudi Arabia, there are 2 points that I want to bring up that happened between the races. First off being Guan Yu Zhou going to Alfa Romeo.
Very quick thoughts on that.
Very quick thoughts.
Given Giovinazzi's performance today, we can tell that it's a situation that's all about money. He's probably bringing in a lot of sponsorship. And look, he's a talented racer. I thought he'd be in Formula One also this year. Didn't think it'd be with Alfa Romeo. But I do think that Giovinazzi still somewhat deserves a spot in F1 because he is a talented driver. I just think that because he doesn't bring as much sponsorship as Guan Yu Zhou's Chinese heritage does, I think that's what ultimately led to the decision.
I think that, Giovinazzi's drive is paid. So it's paid by the Sauber Academy or whatever it is. I don't think that it's all about money. I think that Guan Yu Zhou is a genuine talent, and I think that he's going to do well in Alfa Romeo. Like, we've seen the standard of paid drivers actually get better recently, with the exception of one driver.
I would say 2, but yeah.
Yeah. But I think in general, I think that he's well deserving of this opportunity.
I never said he was. I really thought he'd be. I still think he deserves to be in F1. I just think that their decision was based off the fact that he could bring more sponsorship money than Giovinazzi could.
That's
because
probably...
Giovinazzi has 2 points finishes this year.
He has 2.
But he also has been in. He also has been in Q1 multiple times. So it's pretty. It's very interesting given the actual pace of that car. You know, a world champion in Kimi Räikkönen has a tough time getting that car into the points.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? We'll see how Guan Yu Zhou does. And another point is a few days ago, Frank Williams passed away. So, I mean, we talked about Williams' financial situation, but I think that Frank Williams was really a pioneer for not only F1 as a whole, but just for independent teams, showing that if you have the strength and the determination that you could compete against the best in the world. I mean, imagine Williams in its prime when Frank Williams was at the helm. It beat Ferrari and it beat all these teams. And I wanted to hear a little bit about you and Frank in that situation.
Yeah, well, you summed it up pretty well. I can't really add much to it. He is a pioneer of Formula One. I'm a very big fan of the independent teams just because naturally I love cheering for underdogs and I love cheering for those who people don't really expect to win, but who work hard and do that. And he was emblematic of that. So there's nothing more to say on that end. I think that you really said it well.
Fantastic. So now let's talk about the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix.
Yeah.
First, what do you think of the circuit? I think that it was we talked about this before. We talked about this before actual racing was starting, and I said that I was terrified because it's really fast. I played it in the F1 game, and it's a lot of fun to drive, but it's also it's a crazy circuit.
I am a big fan of the Corniche circuit. I really hope that after next year they stay there, just like I hope they stay at the Losail International Circuit in Qatar. I hope they stay at the Corniche circuit in Saudi Arabia and Jeddah. I think it's a fantastic circuit, and honestly, could be one of my top 5 races of the year, by far.
I think that it was top 5 because of whatever the hell was going on. Because what happened? Seriously, there were so many things that happened.
Right, but that's the beauty of it, is that this circuit causes so many things to happen. If this race happened at Le Castellet, not as many events would have happened. It would have been a Verstappen win in a landslide, and that's that.
Yeah, you have a good point, but I don't know. It just looked really dangerous. I mean, we saw the amount of debris that was on the track. We saw Nikita Mazepin getting crushed. Mick Schumacher, as soon as he loses the rear, getting completely destroyed in the barrier. We had bits of Sebastian Vettel's car just flying away like it was nothing. We had a virtual safety car. How many? 2 safety cars, 3 safety cars, 2 red flags, 2 standing starts. Brake checking, maybe. Was it brake checking? Was it letting him by? Do you want to dive into
so much
that
to
already?
unpack?
Do you want to dive into that already? But
yes, let's first get into the collision that started. Well, we'll first get into the first standing start, actually.
Okay.
In the first standing start, we saw Max interestingly overtake Lewis Hamilton, and somehow, because of decisions of pit stops, the Alpine of Esteban Ocon was the real winner in that situation.
It was
what
genius.
do you think about Max's overtake? Did you agree with the whole negotiation going on? What did you think of the negotiation? Let's dive into it.
I think that the negotiation was very justified. The whole having Ocon first, Hamilton second, Verstappen third was well done. Because let's be real here, I don't even think Max was trying to do the turn. I think it was just, how can I cut off Lewis and then make it look like he was forcing me off and then go around? Like, does Max turn his wheel? And that's a question that we should all ask.
Yeah, well,
we saw what happened in Brazil, Jordan.
Yeah, so the first time it happened in Brazil, we were able to cut him some slack. I think actually the stewards also cut him some slack in Brazil. But it gets to a point where, when you do repeated things and you keep using the same sort of weird excuse to justify it, at one point it's the boy who cried wolf, and they don't believe you anymore.
It also happened 3 times this race.
Yeah, and I think that at one point, the whole negotiation process was because they knew that the steward's decision was going to go in one way and one way only. But they didn't want to let it impact the outcome of the championship. So they said to themselves, and Martin Brundle highlighted this on the broadcast, they said to themselves, let's let the teams determine their fate in this championship race, as opposed to letting the stewards essentially determine the championship. And I love the negotiation process. I love the fact that there was threats of it going to the stewards, which, coerced, but persuaded Red Bull into agreeing. It kind of felt like a litigation process where they reached a settlement before going to jury. So So it's like the Suits episodes where they reach a settlement like 5 seconds before showing up to the judge. That's kind of what it felt like.
Gotta be honest, I haven't seen a single episode of Suits, so I have no idea what you're talking about.
But you get what I'm saying.
The
And
viewers
so,
know what you're talking about.
yeah, exactly. But yeah, I think that Max Verstappen did a lot of, and again, I don't want to be accusing and come off that way, but it kind of felt from the viewer's perspective that he was doing some malicious actions.
I have to agree with you. I mean, my opinion on Max Verstappen has flipped over the last few races because like I said earlier, it's become way too aggressive. It's not calm and collected like Lewis Hamilton, because let's be real here. In any of the situations that we've had over the last few races, who's ended up on top?
Lewis Hamilton.
Yeah. So, I mean, we cannot underestimate how amazing of a drive that was for Lewis Hamilton, though.
No,
Because through all of that, he ended up winning by something like 11 seconds. So,
with a front end plate that was
yeah,
ripped apart.
with like 2/3 of a front wing. So,
Yeah.
you know what I thought? I thought that after the whole attempting to let him by and then, you know, hitting the back of the car, I thought that Lewis Hamilton was going to have to pit for a new wing, meaning that Max Verstappen was going to clinch the championship because he would have been whatever it was at that point, P6 or P7, which meant that if Max Verstappen won, he would have won the championship. And I said to myself, there is no way that this championship would have been determined by that.
Yeah.
So that was unreal. I mean,
Let, let's move it along to Max's 5 second penalty. I mean, we're gonna
yeah,
ask the accusing Max of things, but what do you think of the steward's decision to give him a 5 second penalty? And how do you think that played into his race strategy in the last 10 laps?
I think it was so weird. I don't, this race was such a blur. It was 2 hours long, and I can't even remember everything that happened, even though it finished what at this point 30 minutes ago, an hour ago, something like that. So um I feel like the turn one runoff has caused so much controversy in this race that they need to find a way to either widen it or make it more of a break, make it a harder braking turn so that if there's something that happens, you don't need to really run off. But I have no idea what to think of that penalty because it was such a mess. Everything after each restart, it was all a mess.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy, especially the first restart, I would say, when there was the whole crash with Nikita Mazepin and George Russell and Sergio Perez and Charles Leclerc. It was crazy. That turn one is incredible. I would say maybe widen it a bit, but other than that, I think the track is very well designed. I actually love this track. I think Telka did an amazing job designing this track. And the one thing that will concern me is if the drivers, because we're not drivers, we don't know what actually is the track and the safety of the track. So
Yeah.
if the drivers come up with some safety concerns, especially with the debris everywhere and that turn one, if they, I haven't seen the post-race interviews yet, but if they do mention some safety concerns, my opinion of the track will change. But other than that, I really like the track and I like the high speed of it. And I like that there's no real hard braking zones. And despite the fact that there are no hard braking zones, there are a bunch of overtaking opportunities.
Yeah.
So, which makes it really cool.
It looks like a hairpin. Like, the ones where it's like made out of metal and then there's one side where it's straight and then the other side it's That's what it looks like.
Yeah.
That's what it looks like for me. But I tried it out in the F1 game, and I was on the edge of my seat just doing my lap, and I was using an Xbox controller because there is so many blind turns, and you don't know. I mean, you do know what's coming up next, but at the same time, you kind of don't. And we saw that in qualifying as well with all the traffic that uh, it screwed up someone's last turn. I forget who it was, but it was either Verstappen or Perez or one of them, where there was so much traffic leading into the first straight that someone had to slow down because they just couldn't complete their lap. Um, and I mean, there was also Max hitting the wall, but that's another story. Um, but now let's move into the controversy of what are we going to call this? The brake check, the miscommunication, the giving the place, but not really. What happened there?
This is the part of the race where I have so many questions. He was instructed to give the place back. Lewis didn't know about it, so he was going at full speed and didn't know what was going on, why he was stopping. And Verstappen was playing some games with his brake, and so happened to be that Lewis collided with Max, and that's what happened with his front wing. What confused me is that Max never really gave the place back later on in the race.
I was so lost.
So I didn't know if Max was actually told to give the place back or something happened, or I don't know what happened, but I know that what was said happened didn't really follow up with what was supposed to happen eventually. Because if you saw 2 or 3 laps later, there was a fight again at turn 27 for the lead of the race, and Max was actually fighting for it. And he wasn't giving it back easily because he was in range. So I was really confused at that. And even if there was miscommunication, I feel like he should have given the place back eventually, a lap later, or like then and there. So I was just very confused at the entire situation, and I don't think that anybody really should be penalized for it, but I do think that there's something that we don't know that made the situation so confusing.
I was so lost. I didn't understand a single thing that was going on after that. One thing that I will say was about the actual situation of attempting to let Lewis by and then it not working. Um, I think that Lewis was just really confused. Uh, I think that Max did enough of a job to let him by so that he could get the inside line and then move forward. But um, one thing that I'm worried about is that as we speak, it's currently under investigation, and we could have penalties, we could have disqualifications, and it could affect the championship after this. So
Yeah, we don't know.
we don't know what is going to. I mean, for all you know, we could check our phones after the recording of this podcast and say that Lewis Hamilton has been disqualified from the race because he rammed into the back of Max Verstappen, and then that's how he wins the championship.
That would be crazy.
What? I mean, I think my reaction just shows that what happened during this race was a mess. It was entertaining. I was on the edge of my seat for the entire time. I think they need to fix some parts of the circuit because I don't know, it looked really dangerous in certain parts.
Especially in F2 with Fittipaldi's
yeah, exactly. But
crash.
I think that all in all, this was a weekend where the FIA and Formula One really need to come together and figure out how do we make sure something like this doesn't happen again?
Yeah.
Because we should not be leaving a race confused.
No. But we didn't leave the race like Max Verstappen left the race. He went to
he
the
left the podium.
Yeah, he was at the podium ceremony. Everything was going great, and the champagne came out, and Max said, "Bye-bye."
Bye.
He was out, and again, I don't know what to make of this, but it's just very interesting, his reaction.
I think he's just mad. I think he's just very, very mad.
Yeah. Let's save the let's save the Max angry comments potentially for next week when he may lose the championship. But speaking of what may or may not happen, Jonah,
oh my God,
let's talk about next week in
Don't
7 days' time.
On me.
Asterisk, given there are no qualifications or any news after this Grand Prix, they're level-headed going into Abu Dhabi. We might actually get an exciting race that's worth watching this year. Jonah, what do you think is going to happen for the 2021 World Championship? Who will win?
I'm terrified, Jordan. I am absolutely terrified. That is, I hope that Lewis and Max don't crash into each other. But if something's gonna happen, it's gonna be in turn one of that race. And I have no idea what's gonna happen. I can't believe I'm saying this, but I cannot deny the fact that Lewis Hamilton has been he has been on a hot streak that could rival any other championship season that he has done in his career. I think that next weekend is going to be a record-breaking week, and it's going to be because Lewis Hamilton is going to win his 8th world championship.
I can't disagree with you. I agree also.
But I am absolutely terrified as to what's going to happen.
Look, I think that it can get really, really heated. And I think that especially if something happens this week where, the stewards are involved and there was some contact, I think that it could be a very dramatic ending. But I do think that given that there is no contact, I do think that Lewis will also win his 8th world title, just because I don't think that Max is ready for his first world title.
He right now it shows that he's being too aggressive.
He's now. It's just for me that if I was in his position, my mindset would be way too angry going into next week, and I wouldn't. And I don't know what work he does, but getting the feeling that it wouldn't be mentally 100% for one crucial race.
If I were Max, I would have left the podium too. I just want to be clear. I would have been raging. I feel like
there's some sportsmanship that needs to be shown.
I know, but I would have at least cheers Lewis and Valtteri before leaving, but I would have been equally as mad.
Yes, very fair. But yeah, look, it's going to be very interesting, and I'm so
Lance Stroll's going to win the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix 2020-21.
Yes, there you go. We'll manifest it.
Yeah. If I say it on the record, it's gonna happen.
We'll see about that.
I called Alonso being on the podium in Qatar, so.
Oh, did you? I forget.
I said someone who has not been on the podium this season is going to be on the podium.
That's true, you did.
So, look. I called Alonso. We didn't have any predictions for this race because we've had a crazy last few weeks because we are also students and we have finals. So, yeah, it's been, I don't even know what to say anymore. 7 days time. It's going to be
I
the
think
end.
what's going to be left to said is going to be what is done on the racetrack next week at the Yas Marina circuit.
If we have an interesting race at Yas Marina, this will truly be an interesting season. We've had interesting races in Le Castellet, in Barcelona, Monaco, kind of like. I'm in complete shock. And on top of that, this season we started a podcast. So our first
inaugural season.
Our first season is going to come to an end in 7 days' time. So yeah, if you want to see our reaction to the end of the season, and if you want to hear more from us, feel free to like our Facebook page and follow us on Instagram at the JJF1 podcast. And we will see you for the next episode. See ya.
See ya.